Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the shuttle and watched the massive space station grow larger ahead of them. Harmony Point looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness of space, with silver petals that gleamed under the light of distant stars. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but never imagined it would feel so terrifying and exciting at the same time. The young scientist adjusted his blue uniform and checked his equipment bag one more time. Inside were his cameras, scanners, and notebooks filled with everything he knew about alien biology. At 28 years old, Jake had spent his entire career studying life forms from other worlds, but he had never actually met a living alien before. Today that would change forever. Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat across from him in the shuttle, reviewing data on her tablet. She looked calm and professional as always, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. This was the most important diplomatic mission in human history. First contact with the Zephyrian Empire would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community as friends or enemies. The shuttle docked with a soft thump that made Jake's stomach jump. Through the airlock, he could hear strange sounds, musical tones and clicking noises that must be the Zephyrian language. His heart pounded as the doors opened, and they stepped into the station. The corridor beyond was beautiful, but alien. Walls curved like the inside of a seashell and glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled like flowers and metal mixed together. Jake's scientific mind immediately began cataloging details, while his human instincts told him to stay close to the other humans. Their diplomatic escort, Commander Betty Walsh, led them through winding passages toward the main meeting hall. Jake tried to stay focused, but kept getting distracted by the strange architecture. Everything was designed for beings much taller than humans. The doorways reached high above their heads, and the corridors were wide enough for vehicles to drive through. When they reached the ceremonial chamber, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars. Standing in formation near the center were the Zephyrians, and they were nothing like the blurry photos in his research files. Each alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 muscular arms, ending in hands that had 3 long fingers tipped with sharp claws. Their skin looked like living crystal that shifted colors as Jake watched. Most displayed cool blues and greens, but some showed warmer purples and golds. Their faces were angular and beautiful in a way that was completely inhuman. The leader of the Zephyrian delegation stepped forward. Her crystalline skin showed deep purple, with veins of silver running through it. When she spoke, her voice was musical but strong. The translator device rendered her words into English with a slight delay. "I am High Commander Zara Kethran of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. We welcome the humans to this place of peace and discussion." Captain Rodriguez responded with the formal greeting they had practiced dozens of times. Jake barely heard the words, because he was too busy staring at the aliens and trying to memorize every detail. As a xenobiologist, this was the greatest moment of his career. The ceremony proceeded smoothly at first. Both sides exchanged gifts and formal statements of peaceful intent. Jake stood with the other scientists and tried to look dignified while his mind raced with questions about Zephyrian anatomy and culture. Then something went wrong with the artificial gravity system. Jake felt the familiar sensation of weightlessness, beginning as the gravity generators flickered. Most of the humans and Zephyrians were prepared for such technical problems, but one of the younger Zephyrian officers seemed caught off guard. Commander Vera Nalfara was standing near the edge of the group when the gravity failed. Jake watched in slow motion as she began to drift toward a sharp metal sculpture that decorated the chamber. Her crystalline skin flashed bright red, which Jake somehow understood meant alarm or fear. Without thinking, Jake pushed off from the floor and floated toward her. His only thought was to prevent her from getting hurt. He reached out and grabbed her arm, using his momentum to pull her away from the dangerous sculpture. The moment their skin touched, everything changed. A wave of sensation unlike anything Jake had ever experienced rushed through his body. It started where his hand made contact with her arm and spread outward like electricity. But this was not painful. It was overwhelming in a completely different way. He could suddenly feel emotions that were not his own. Fear, surprise, and something else he could not identify flooded his mind. Vera's crystalline skin erupted in brilliant gold light that filled the entire chamber. She made a song that was half gasp and half musical note. Her 4 arms wrapped around Jake instinctively, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. The gold light pulsed in rhythm with both their heartbeats. Jake tried to let go, but found he could not. Some invisible force held them together as they drifted in the failing gravity. He could feel her thoughts touching the edges of his mind. Strange images flashed through his consciousness. Vast crystal cities, alien landscapes, and emotions so intense they took his breath away. The gravity system came back online with a sudden jolt. Jake and Vera fell to the floor together, still, glowing with that strange golden light. The entire chamber had gone completely silent. Both human and Zephyrian faces stared at them with expressions of shock and disbelief. Vera slowly released Jake and sat back on her heels. Her skin was still glowing, but the light was fading to a warm amber color. She looked at her hands as if she had never seen them before. When she looked at Jake, her large eyes were filled with something that might have been wonder or terror. High Commander was the first to break the silence. She spoke rapidly in the Zephyrian language, her skin flashing angry reds and oranges. Other Zephyrians joined the conversation, their voices rising in what sounded like argument or panic. Captain Rodriguez moved to Jake's side and helped him stand. "Are you hurt?" she asked quietly. Jake shook his head, but he was not sure that was true. He felt different somehow, as if something fundamental had changed inside him. He could still sense Vera's presence in his mind, like a warm glow. When she moved, he was aware of it even without looking at her. Commander Walsh was already activating her emergency communicator, probably calling for medical teams and security. The carefully planned first contact ceremony had turned into chaos. In a matter of seconds, Jake looked at Vera again and saw that she was staring back at him. Her skin showed colors he had not seen before, deep golds mixed with silver that seemed to pulse with her breathing. Whatever had happened between them, she was experiencing it too. The High Commander's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "The human has triggered the Null-Thara bond. This changes everything." Jake sat in the medical bay of Harmony Point, while Dr. Elena Vasquez ran another scan of his brain. The human doctor frowned at her readings and shook her head. 3 hours had passed since the incident with Vera, and nobody seemed to understand what had happened or how to fix it. Captain Rodriguez paced back and forth across the small room like a caged animal. She had been in emergency meetings with both Earth Command and the Zephyrian delegation, and none of the news was good. The aliens were treating this as a major crisis that could destroy the peace talks before they even began. "The scans show unusual activity in your temporal lobe," Dr. Vasquez explained. "There are new neural pathways that were not there yesterday. It is like your brain has been rewired somehow." Jake nodded, but barely heard her words. His attention was focused on the strange sensations coming from somewhere else in the station. He could feel Vera's presence like a constant warm glow in the back of his mind. When she was upset, which seemed to be most of the time, he felt anxious and restless. When she was calm, he felt peaceful. The worst part was the physical connection. Every few minutes, a wave of alien emotions would wash over him. He experienced anger in colors he had no names for, sadness that felt like ice in his chest, and confusion that made his head spin. The emotions were clearly not human, but somehow he understood them perfectly. Commander Walsh entered the medical bay with a grim expression. "We have a problem," she announced. "The Zephyrians are demanding that Jake be turned over to them immediately. They say he belongs to Commander Nalthara now and must follow their bonding protocols." Captain Rodriguez stopped pacing. "What does that mean exactly? We are still trying to find out. Their translators keep using words that do not have human equivalents, something about life bonds and mating cycles. The High Commander is furious, and half their delegation wants to leave." Jake felt a spike of fear that he knew was coming from Vera. Whatever was happening to them, she was as confused and scared as he was. The thought of being separated from her suddenly seemed unbearable, which frightened him even more. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her equipment. "I need to examine the Zephyrian female to understand what we are dealing with. This appears to be some kind of psychic connection, but the mechanism is completely unknown." 2 hours later, Jake found himself in a conference room with Vera sitting across from him. She was accompanied by an elderly Zephyrian whose crystal skin showed calm silver patterns. A translator introduced him as Scholar Thane Morkith, an N. expert in ancient Zephyrian biology. Vera had not spoken since the incident. Her skin showed muted gold and amber colors that Jake somehow knew meant embarrassment and confusion. Every time she looked at him, waves of complex emotions flooded through their connection. He was beginning to understand that she had no more choice in this than he did. Scholar Morkith began to explain in his musical voice. "What has occurred is called the Nalthara bond in our language. Your word would be something like life mating. It is a psychic and physical connection that links two beings permanently." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "Permanently? How is that possible?" "Zephyrians can only form this bond once in our lifetime," the scholar continued. "We live for approximately 300 of your years, and the bond normally occurs between two of our own kind during the fertile period. The connection allows perfect communication and shared experiences." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Are you saying I am mated to her, whether I want to be or not?" Vera's skin flashed bright red, and Jake immediately felt a surge of hurt feelings. Through their link, he realized his words had wounded her, even though he had not meant them that way. The scholar nodded gravely. "The bond cannot be broken once formed. You will share emotions, physical sensations, and eventually thoughts. Separation by great distances causes severe pain for both parties. In time, you may develop full telepathic communication." Captain Rodriguez stood up abruptly. "This is unacceptable. We cannot have our people forced into permanent relationships with aliens. There must be some way to reverse this." Scholar Morkith's skin showed deep blue patterns that meant sadness. "There is no reversal. Many have tried throughout our history. The bond is written into our genetic code by evolution. It ensures that mated pairs will stay together and protect each other." For the first time since the incident, Vera spoke. Her voice was soft and musical, but Jake could hear the pain in it even through the translator. "I did not choose this either. My career as a warrior is finished. No Zephyrian will serve under a commander who is bonded to an alien." Jake felt her shame and disappointment wash over him. In her culture, being a warrior was everything, and now she was facing exile because of him. The guilt was overwhelming. Dr. Vasquez asked the questions that Jake was too stunned to voice. What exactly does this bond require? How will it affect their daily lives? They must remain within a few miles of each other, or experience great pain, Scholar Morkith explained. They will share all emotions and physical sensations. Injury to one will be felt by the other. Over time, their minds will merge partially, though each will retain their individual identity. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Jake looked at Vera and saw his own despair reflected in her golden skin. They were strangers from different worlds, and now they were bound together for life. Captain Rodriguez was the first to speak. "We need options. Both governments are demanding solutions." "There is one possibility," Scholar Morkith said slowly. "In ancient times, such bonds were considered sacred gifts. The bonded pairs often became great leaders because they could think and act as one mind in two bodies. Perhaps this could be seen as an opportunity rather than a disaster." Over the next several hours, a plan slowly emerged. Neither Earth nor the Zephyrian Empire wanted to create an international incident over what was clearly an accident. The solution was to establish Jake and Vera as special ambassadors who would live on a joint research station and study their Shi. Unique Bond. Jake was not sure how he felt about becoming a test subject for the rest of his life. But when he looked at Vera, he could sense that she was thinking the same thing. At least they would face this strange future together. The High Commander made the announcement to both delegations that evening. "Commander Nalthara and Dr. Morrison will serve as the first bonded ambassadors between our peoples. They will help us understand how such connections might benefit both species." As the meeting ended, Jake found himself walking with Vera toward their temporary quarters. Neither spoke, but through their link, he could feel her trying to accept their new reality just as he was. When they reached the corridor where their rooms were located, Vera stopped and looked at him. Her skin showed soft blue and silver patterns. That he was learning meant curiosity and hope. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "we can learn to make this work." Jake nodded and felt a small spark of her determination flow through their connection. Whatever happened next, they would face it as partners, rather than prisoners. 6 months had passed since Jake and Vera first arrived at Research Station Unity, and their daily routine had become almost normal. Jake woke each morning in his quarters, knowing exactly how Vera was feeling through their bond. Today she was anxious about something, which made him restless as he prepared for work. Their living arrangement was unusual but practical. They occupied separate but connected quarters on the same level of the station. The bond required them to stay within a few miles of each other, but they had learned that being in different rooms was perfectly fine. Jake had his laboratory, where he continued his xenobiology research, while Vera served as the military liaison between human and Zephyrian security forces. Dr. Amy Chun knocked on Jake's door just as he was finishing breakfast. The relationship counselor had been assigned to their case 3 months ago, when it became clear that their bond was causing psychological stress for both of them. She was a kind woman with gray hair and gentle eyes who somehow managed to help them navigate the impossible situation they found themselves in. "Good morning, Jake," Dr. Chun said as she entered. "How are you feeling today?" "Vera is worried about something," Jake replied automatically. "She has been tense since yesterday evening, but she will not tell me what is bothering her." This was one of their ongoing problems. The bond let them feel each other's emotions, but it did not automatically share thoughts or memories. They had to communicate verbally like any other couple, except they could not hide their feelings even when they wanted to. Dr. Chun made notes on her tablet. "Have you tried asking her directly about her concerns?" Jake shook his head. In the early days of their bond, he had asked too many questions and made Vera feel invaded. She came from a warrior culture that valued privacy and emotional control. Having a human constantly aware of her feelings was difficult for her to accept. Walked together toward the central meeting room, where Vera would be waiting. Through their connection, Jake felt her anxiety spike as they approached. Something was definitely wrong. Vera was standing by the large window that showed the stars. Beyond the station, her crystalline skin displayed muted gold and red patterns that Jake had learned meant she was trying to control strong emotions. When she turned to face them, her expression was carefully neutral. "The Zephyrian High Council has sent a delegation." To inspect our progress, Vado announced without preamble. They arrive tomorrow. Jake felt his stomach drop, and through their bond, Vera experienced his sudden fear. The High Council had opposed their arrangement from the beginning. Many of the older Zephyrians believed that bonding with an alien was an abomination that weakened their species. Dr. Chun sat down at the conference table. What exactly does this inspection involve? They want to evaluate whether our bond has made me unfit for duty, Vera said, her voice carefully controlled. There will be tests of my combat abilities and military knowledge. If I fail, they will recommend that I be stripped of my rank and exiled. Through their connection, Jake felt the depth of Vera's fear and shame. Being a warrior was not just her career, it was her identity. The thought of losing that forever was devastating to her. What can I do to help? Jake asked. Vera's skin showed a brief flash of surprise. This is not your burden to carry. I must face this alone. We are bonded, Jake reminded her. Your burdens are mine now, just as mine are yours. Over the past months, Jake had discovered that the bond was changing him in unexpected ways. His reflexes had become faster, and his strength had increased. Dr. Vasquez believed that Vera's warrior genetics were somehow influencing his physiology through their connection. More importantly, Jake was learning to think like a Zephyrian warrior. He understood concepts of honor and duty that had been foreign to him before. Sometimes he would find himself standing straighter or speaking more formally without realizing it. Vera was changing too. She had begun to show curiosity about human art and music. Last week, Jake had found her in his laboratory reading one of his poetry books with intense concentration. When he asked about it, her skin had shown embarrassment, but also wonder. The next day, the Zephyrian delegation arrived in an impressive military transport. Jake watched from the observation deck as 5 tall aliens in ceremonial armor made their way through the station. Their skin showed the deep purple and silver patterns of high-ranking nobles. The leader was Commander Kale Rathmer, a veteran warrior whose reputation was known throughout the Empire. His skin was scarred from many battles, and his 4 arms moved with the precise confidence of someone who had never been defeated in combat. The inspection began in the station's training center. Jake was required to observe, but not participate, as Vera demonstrated her fighting skills against holographic opponents. She moved like liquid metal, her 4 arms weaving complex patterns as she destroyed one enemy after another. But Jake could feel her uncertainty through their bond. The months of living with human emotions had changed her fighting style. She hesitated before delivering killing blows and showed concern for minimizing collateral damage. These were not weaknesses in Jake's opinion, but he knew the inspectors would see them differently. Commander Rathmer made disapproving noises as he watched. Your technique has become soft now, Thara. You fight like someone who questions the necessity of violence. I fight with wisdom rather than mere aggression. Vera replied, but Jake felt her confidence wavering. The tests continued for hours. Vera answered questions about military strategy and Zephyrian law, while Jake sat nearby feeling every spike of her anxiety. When the inspectors began asking about their bond and whether it had compromised her loyalty to the Empire, Jake could remain silent no longer. Commander Rathmer, Jake said, standing up despite the surprised looks from everyone in the room. May I speak? The Zephyrian commander's skin showed irritation. The human is not part of this evaluation. Actually, he is, Vera said suddenly. Her skin began to show the deep gold patterns that Jake had learned meant determination and courage. Our bond means that anything affecting me affects him as well. If you are evaluating my fitness, you must evaluate both of us. Jake felt a surge of gratitude and love flow through their connection. Vera was choosing to stand with him rather than try to distance herself to save her career. Commander, Rathmer's expression was skeptical. Very well. Show us how this alien bond makes you stronger rather than weaker. What happened next surprised everyone, including Jake and Vera themselves. As they stood together facing the Zephyrian inspectors, their bond suddenly deepened. Jake found that he could sense not just Vera's emotions, but her thoughts and memories. He saw through her eyes and felt her warrior's instincts as if they were his own. But at the same time, Vera experienced Jake's human perspective. She felt his curiosity about the world, his compassion for others, and his determination to protect those he cared about. The combination of their different viewpoints created something entirely new. When Commander Rathmer challenged them to demonstrate their combined abilities, Jake and Vera moved as one person in two bodies. Jake's human creativity combined with Vera's warrior training allowed them to solve tactical problems that neither could have handled alone. They answered questions with perfect coordination, each providing the knowledge the other lacked. When Rathmer presented them with a complex military scenario, they developed a solution that impressed even the skeptical commander. Interesting, Rathmer admitted as the demonstration ended. Your bond has created capabilities that neither species possesses individually. Jake felt Vera's cautious hope through their connection. The inspection was not over, but they had proven that their bond was a source of strength rather than weakness. As the day ended, Jake and Vera stood together watching the stars through the station's main viewport. They did not need to speak to share their thoughts about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as partners who had chosen to embrace their connection rather than fight against it. A year into their bond, Jake made a discovery that changed everything he thought he knew about Zephyrian history. He was researching ancient biological texts in the station's library when he found references to something called the Great Bonding Era. The translator program struggled with the old language, but the meaning was clear enough to make his hands shake with excitement. Jake rushed to find Vera, who was in the communications center reviewing security reports. Through their bond, she felt his excitement before he even entered the room. Her crystalline skin shifted to curious blue and gold patterns as she looked up from her work. "What have you discovered?" she asked, setting aside her reports. Jake activated the holographic display and showed her the ancient texts he had found. These documents are over 2,000 years old. They describe a time when Zephyrians regularly bonded with other species. The practice was not only common, but considered sacred. Vera's skin showed shock as she read the translated passages. According to the records, the ancient Zephyrian Empire had been much larger and more advanced than the current one. Bonded pairs of different species had served as explorers, diplomats, and leaders who could understand multiple perspectives simultaneously. "This cannot be accurate," Vera said, but Jake could feel her growing fascination through their connection. "We have always been taught that bonding with aliens is unnatural and weakening." Jake pulled up more files. "Look at this." The records show that bonded pairs achieved things that single individuals could never accomplish. They developed technologies, solved conflicts, and created art that influenced entire civilizations. The texts described bonded pairs who could think with the combined intelligence of multiple species. Human creativity paired with Zephyrian discipline, or Alterian logic combined with Terran emotion, had created hybrid consciousness that transcended the limitations of any single race. What happened to end this era? Vera asked. Jake had found that part of the story too, and it was troubling. A conservative faction within the Zephyrian government had gained power during a period of military conflict. They declared that bonding with aliens diluted the purity of their species and banned the practice. Over several generations, the knowledge and acceptance of multi-species bonding had been erased from common memory. Vera stood silent for a long moment, processing this information. Her skin showed deep purple patterns that Jake had learned meant She was thinking carefully about something important. "If this is true," she said finally, "then our bond is not an accident or aberration. It is a return to something ancient and powerful." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth Command. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the main screen with an expression Jake had never seen before, pure terror mixed with grim determination. "We have a situation," the captain announced without preamble. "Long-range sensors have detected an alien fleet approaching our sector. The ships do not match any known design, and they are not responding to communication. Attempts." Jake felt Vera's warrior instincts surge through their bond. Her entire posture changed as she shifted into military mode. "How many ships, and what is their estimated arrival time?" Vera asked. 17 vessels of various sizes. They will reach the outer colonies in approximately 6 days. Both Earth and Zephyrian fleets are mobilizing, but we have never faced an unknown enemy before. Over the next 2 days, Jake and Vera worked with military analysts from both species to study the approaching threat. The alien ships moved in patterns unlike anything either human or Zephyrian tacticians had seen. Their technology seemed to adapt and change in response to scanning attempts. Dr. Peter Collins arrived from Earth with a team of xenobiologists, while scholar Keth Morden came from the Zephyrian homeworld with experts in ancient warfare. The combined team worked around the clock to understand what they were facing. The breakthrough came when Jake noticed something strange about the enemy ship formations. They moved with perfect coordination, but showed no creativity or unpredictable behavior. Every maneuver followed logical patterns that could be calculated in advance. "They think like machines," Jake told the assembled scientists and military officers. "Their coordination is perfect because they share a hive mind, but that also makes them predictable." Vera nodded, her warrior's training helping her see the tactical implications. A hive mind would be vulnerable to opponents who can think and act unpredictably. They would not know how to respond to creative or illogical strategies. Scholar Morden's ancient eyes lit up with understanding. In the old texts, this is why bonded pairs were so effective in warfare. They could coordinate like a hive mind, but retain individual creativity and unpredictability. The idea that emerged from their discussions was both brilliant and terrifying. If bonded pairs could think as unified entities while maintaining individual creativity, they would be the perfect counter to a hive mind enemy. But creating more bonds was dangerous and potentially impossible. Dr. Collins had been studying Jake and Vera's bond since his arrival. The neural pathways in both your brains show specific patterns that might be replicable. We could potentially create temporary bonds between volunteers from both species. The process would be experimental and risky. They had no way to know if other species combinations could form stable bonds, or what the psychological effects might be. Several volunteers could suffer permanent brain damage or death. Despite the risks, volunteers stepped forward from both human and Zephyrian crews. The first attempts were failures that left the test subjects with severe headaches and disorientation. But Jake and Vera served as guides, using their own bond to help others achieve the delicate balance required. Lieutenant Kate Murphy, a human pilot, successfully bonded with Zephyrian navigator Tel Corthan after 3 days of careful preparation. The moment their connection formed, both individuals gasped as they experienced the expansion of consciousness that Jake and Vera knew so well. More successful bonds followed. Captain Ben Foster connected with Commander Yara Veilthus, creating a tactical team that could analyze battle scenarios with unprecedented speed and accuracy. Dr. Helen Price bonded with Scholar Neth Cordal, forming a research partnership that made breakthrough discoveries about the approaching enemy. Each successful bond created individuals with capabilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. The bonded pairs could communicate instantly across great distances, coordinate complex actions without verbal commands, and solve problems that would have taken individual minds much longer to understand. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Jake realized that their accidental bond had become the foundation for something much larger. The ancient Zephyrian texts had been right. Bonded consciousness was not weakness, but evolution. The first enemy scouts entered the system just as the final bonded pairs completed their training. Jake and Vera stood on the bridge of the joint command ship, surrounded by other bonded pairs who would serve as squadron leaders in the coming battle. Through their connections, all the bonded individuals could sense each other's presence. They formed a network of consciousness that spanned both fleets, creating a unified command structure that could respond to threats faster than any traditional military organization. "Enemy ships are taking attack positions," reported the sensor operator. "They are moving in the calculated patterns our analysis predicted." Jake felt Vera's confidence flow through their bond, amplified by the presence of all the other connected minds around them. For the first time since the crisis began, he believed they might actually win. The ancient Zephyrians had known that bonded consciousness was the next step in evolution. Now Jake and Vera would prove that two species working as one could overcome any threat that faced them. The final battle began at dawn on the third day, when the enemy fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the contested system. Jake stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the tactical display show 17 alien vessels arranged in perfect geometric formations. Through his bond with Vera, he could feel her warriors' excitement mixed with his own scientific curiosity about their unknown opponents. Around them, the other bonded pairs took their positions at various control stations. Each pair moved with the fluid coordination that only came from shared consciousness. Lieutenant Murphy and Navigator Corthin operated the weapon systems as if they were extensions of their own bodies. Captain Foster and Commander Valthus coordinated fleet movements with wordless precision. The enemy ships began their attack with mechanical efficiency. Their weapons fired in calculated patterns designed to achieve maximum damage with minimum risk. But as Jake watched the battle unfold, he realized that the hive mind controlling the enemy fleet was making a critical error. "They are treating use like a traditional military force," Jake said to Vera through their mental connection rather than speaking aloud. "They expect us to respond according to standard tactical doctrine." Vera's thoughts flowed back to him, filled with fierce joy. "Then we will show them what bonded consciousness can accomplish." The bonded pairs began to implement strategies that no conventional military force could have executed. Instead of maintaining rigid formations, the ships moved like a living organism, with each vessel responding to threats and opportunities instantaneously. When enemy fire targeted the command ship, 3 other vessels moved to intercept without receiving orders. The bonded pairs controlling those ships had felt the danger through their shared network and responded automatically. The enemy weapons struck empty space where the command ship had been moments before. Jake watched in amazement as the battle evolved into something completely unprecedented. The human and Zephyrian ships fought as a single entity, with dozens of independent minds contributing to every decision. When one bonded pair identified a weakness in enemy formations, that knowledge instantly spread to every other pair in the fleet. The hive mind controlling the enemy began to show signs of confusion. Their perfect geometric formations started to break down as they encountered tactics that followed no logical pattern. Ships that should have been easy targets suddenly vanished from their predicted positions. Weapons that should have found their marks struck empty space. "They cannot predict our actions because we are not thinking like a machine," Vera observed. Her crystalline skin showed patterns of gold and silver that Jake had learned meant triumph and pride. The turning point came when Dr. Price and scholar Kerdal made a breakthrough discovery about the enemy technology. Through their bonded consciousness, They realized that the alien ships were controlled by a central mind that processed information sequentially rather than parallel. If we can overload their processing capacity with too many simultaneous threats, their coordination will collapse, Dr. Price announced to the entire fleet through the bonded network. What followed was the most complex military maneuver in recorded history. All 36 ships in the combined fleet attacked different targets simultaneously, while constantly changing their positions and tactics. The bonded pairs coordinated movements that would have been impossible for individual minds, too. Calculate. Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had experienced before. Through his bond with Vera, he was connected to every other bonded pair in the fleet. He could sense Lieutenant Murphy's piloting instincts, Captain Foster's tactical knowledge, and Dr. Price's scientific insights, all flowing together into a unified understanding. The enemy hive mind began to fracture under the assault. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination started making errors. Some vessels fired on their own allies, while others fled in random directions. The geometric formations dissolved into chaos as the Central Intelligence lost control of its distributed fleet. Jake watched through the tactical display as enemy ships began to surrender or retreat. The few that remained functional were no longer operating as a coordinated force. They had become individual vessels with no unified strategy or purpose. The battle was over in less than 4 hours. The enemy fleet that had seemed invincible was destroyed or scattered, defeated by an alliance of bonded consciousness that transcended the limitations of any single species. As the immediate danger passed, Jake felt the network of bonded minds begin to relax and separate. Each pair maintained their own connection while allowing privacy and individual thought to return. The experience had been overwhelming, but also transformative.